Establishing the PHA policy on decreases in the payment standard amount during the HAP contract term will transition to small area FMRs will likely result in lower payment standards in the lower cost areas of a PHA's jurisdiction. HCV families searching for units will be impacted by this change if adjustments in payment standard amounts affect the number and location of rental units available to them. HCV families who are already under HAP contract in areas where payment standard decreases may choose to move to higher cost areas, but some will opt to stay in their current units and neighborhoods. The final rule amends the HCV program to reflect a provision of the Housing Opportunities Through Modernization Act of 2016, or HOTMA as it's commonly known. Under the final rule, no PHA is required to reduce a family's payment standard during the HAP contract term due to a reduction in the applicable FMR. This policy applies to all PHAs. It overturns the previous policy that required PHAs to use the lower payment standard to calculate a family's HAP beginning on the effective date of the family's second reexamination following the effective date of the decrease in payment standard. The final rule further expands the PHA's administrative discretion to any payment standard decrease, not just payment standard decreases that result from a decrease in the FMR. Now, for families under HAP contract on the effective date of a decrease in the payment standard amount, PHAs have three options to choose from. A PHA could institute a hold harmless policy. They could reduce the subsidy based on payment standards above the basic range, or they could have no change in policy. The first option we mentioned is the hold harmless policy, which means there will be no reduction in subsidy for a family under HAP contract. Under this option, a PHA continues to use the existing higher payment standard when calculating the family subsidy during the HAP contract term. PHAs choosing the hold harmless option will need to calculate subsidies based on the hold harmless payment standard for families under HAP, while applying new payment standards based on small area FMRs for all new HAP contracts that the PHA executes after the effective date of the revised payment standard schedule. For example, the new payment standard would apply to families off the waiting list who are issued vouchers and any current participant who is moving to a new unit with continued HCV assistance. The second option involves limiting the reduction of the payment standard. In this case, a PHA reduces the payment standard to a level that is above the 110% limit of the basic range. It is still below the payment standard that was in effect prior to the decrease, but not as big a drop. This above basic range payment standard may be held at this level indefinitely or reduced over time until it reaches the normal applicable payment standard amount. The third option is to make no change in policy. Under this option, a PHA uses the lower payment standard to calculate the family's HAP, which will mean a decrease in the family subsidy. If the PHA opts to reduce the payment standard amount used to calculate the family subsidy, whether on a limited basis or all at once, the initial reduction cannot take place before the effective date of the family's second regular reexamination following the effective date of the decrease in payment standard. Phased-in reductions may then proceed on an annual basis. The PHA must provide the family with at least 12 months written notice that the payment standard is being reduced during the term of the HAP contract before the effective date of the reduced payment standard amount. This requirement applies whether the reduction is phased in or taken all at once. A PHA may establish different policies regarding a decrease in payment standards for different parts of the areas designated for small area FMR use within its jurisdiction, such as for different zip codes or group zip codes. Within each area, though, the policy must be applied uniformly to all families under HAP contract. PHAs may not, for example, establish a hold harmless policy limited to elderly households or those that include a person with a disability, although the effects on these households should be considered when a PHA determines which of the three approaches to apply in a given zip code. Regardless of the option a PHA selects, it must update its administrative plan to indicate how it will handle decreases in payment standard amounts for families under HAP contracts. We'll discuss administrative plan updates related to small area FMRs a bit later.
When considering which of these three options to employ, PHAs should examine several factors: the rent burden to affected tenants, likely increases or decreases in the availability of units in other areas, PHA budget impacts, and the complexity of implementation. Policies that present an advantage for one factor may pose a challenge for another. For example, if a PHA implements lower payment standards in lower cost areas, the lower HAP payments in those areas may help to reduce average HAP costs. This may allow the PHA to serve more families or to offset increases in HAP as families relocate to higher cost areas. It may also provide an incentive for families to move to higher cost areas. However, families who stay in lower cost areas after payment standards have decreased may be among those who are least able to move or to afford a rent increase, such as elderly households or those that include a person with a disability. Those households may experience an unsustainable rent burden if the new payment standards are used to determine their HAP subsidy levels. On the other hand, PHAs that hold all families harmless from decreases in payment standards may find themselves in a difficult budgetary situation. Increases in HAP as families relocate to higher cost areas or initially lease up in those areas may require the PHA to implement cost-cutting measures, such as reducing the number of families being served. Phasing in any payment standard decreases over time may allow for a balanced approach that protects residents and allows the PHA to realize some HAP savings in lower cost areas. These savings can help offset HAP increases in higher cost areas. However, this is the most administratively difficult route to pursue.